he sees himself, then he gets
A
a
little nervous.
He's very visual also. But Dober goes now to Yeshiva's Banim Lamakim. It's part of Torah Vadas. You're familiar. And Rabbi Horowitz and Rabbi Frankel's his Rabbi Frankel, and all the wonderful staff there. Today they went on a trip because they had a Pesach contest.
Oh.
And they were able to go on a trip today, so they went somewhere in Muncie, Turtle something. And
did you enjoy your trip, Dober?
Dober, you like the trip? You like it, yeah?
Nice trip. Okay.
Likes the trips there. So, as I said, I always felt that I don't have to go too far. In other words, we could always find wherever we are. We could, bring some, some light to wherever we are. You know the famous song "Shine a Little Light." It's actually one of someone who I went to yeshiva with. He was my older brother's class, and Rabbi Itzi Horowitz. He always had that smile and that that sense of simcha, and this is something that we could bring everywhere we are, wherever it is.
That's the one that's not well, right?
Yeah, the one that has ALS. And he actually writes a blog. He writes an article, a weekly article with his eyes, and he points to the alphabet. And recently, I think a TV station interviewed him, and or his wife as well there, and he was able to answer through the screen. But the message is that we all have a mission. I remember, again, growing up, one of the things that caught me was a sense of urgency. That every yid has a purpose, and we all have something to accomplish. And I think it was Rav Nachman Breslov says that the day we were born is the day when Hashem decided the world cannot exist without us, without each person. So this is universal. Chabad doesn't have the copyright on this. Everyone has this.
Boy, do they have the copyright. Boy, oh my God!
Listen, they maybe they started maybe the trend, but Baruch Hashem today, you have so many groups. You have Baruch Hashem, you have Radio Dabrut, you have Aish and all these wonderful groups that do amazing. In fact, in Staten Island, we have a lot of Balabatim that are involved with outreach. We have Rabbi Shandalov, who does Kiruv on campus. We have Rabbi Yuzansky. We're actually, my wife and I, we teach there. My wife started teaching there when the school started 7 years ago. And Baruch Hashem, it's 100.
That's the school in Forest, right?
Now they're on Richmond Road in Richmond Town, and we have a camp. We have a summer day camp. My wife and I, mostly my wife, I should say, for the last 10 years plus, and now we're doing it together with Rabbi Yuzansky at his school, and expecting close to 100 kids.
Wow,
kids who probably would end up in public school or non or secular camps. It's an opportunity for them to teach a little bit Yiddishkeit, and
whatever they catch on. I mean,
it's amazing. Every little bit counts. You never know. I once remember speaking with a frum lady from Flatbush, and she told me, how I became frum? I used to have a Shabbos friend when she was a young girl living at the time in East New York. Her parents, were not frum, but she remembers going with her this frum girl. I forget from which family, but she said that she used to go and play with her, and that had an influence on her. And today, she's completely of mishpacha. You wouldn't even think for a second that she grew up in a non-frum home. So you never know the friendship that children have. You reach out to someone, even if he's not wearing a yarmulke, let's say, but he's Jewish. Say, how are you? Make him feel comfortable. At the supermarket, or anytime we see someone who may look a little different, maybe but we know they're Jewish. Certainly, we should try to do our part to try to make them feel part of Am Yisrael, and just the warmth sometimes goes a long way. And so maybe that's something your listeners, they never you never know, especially here in Brooklyn. I mean, you have areas that I know that you could have a non-frum family living nearby, or in Staten Island for that matter, anywhere. And you never know, just one little gesture. Sometimes sending challah for Shabbos, or a little treat, something nice. Um, my next door neighbor in Staten Island is actually a Yid, not from American, typically American. And I remember his son actually sent to us some hamantash, and we couldn't eat it, obviously. But it just shows that he respects us. He realizes that we are from Yidden, and we celebrate. He hears all the
Celebrations.
all the celebrations going on, the Yom Tovim, and they felt that this is something he wanted to do. So you never know. One little gesture of some act of chesed. We're always reminded of the Rambam. The Rambam says that in Hilchos Tshuva, that everyone should see the world as if on a scale, on a cosmic scale. And there's one big gigantic scale, and one good act that we do, one good mitzvah that we do, a good word that we share, or even a good thought, a good machshava, could tip the entire scale and bring Yeshua, bring Geula to the whole world. And something that I remember always hearing from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and how much he always said how everything counts, every little mitzvah counts, and bringing Yidden back to Yiddishkeit. Everyone could think of another Yid that perhaps they could reach out to, or it doesn't have to be necessarily someone that's not frum, but even our classmates. We have kids in our class that we could look out for and make them feel more welcomed, and give them a smile. A smile could go a long way. Maybe we could volunteer in so many different ways, and in bringing more chesed, more acts of chesed in this world, and ultimately bring the Geula. One time the Rebbe asked, how could we bring the Geula? We know that the world is not necessarily better than it was 100 years ago in terms of Yiddishkeit and so on. So Rebbe really gave a fascinating answer. He said, we don't look at the present state. We look at all the generations before us. We know there's so many Maisim Tovim and tzedakahs that were done throughout the generation. We're like like little people on top of giants, and it's the chesed, the mitzvahs the Torah that we're learning. It's all cumulative. It never goes away. And the world in general, we see all over the world. You read about, and I was reading in the Ami magazine, amazing. In Nepal, they had 500 people, or was it Nepal, or was it in Bangkok, Thailand? They have a kosher restaurant for the Israelis, that want to tour the world. So they make their prices cheaper, or the same price than the goyish, than a non-kosher restaurant, so that they say, why not have kosher if it's the same price? We're not, we're not spending more money on it. And they have this kosher. And every Friday night they have a open. Rabbi Wilhelm has an open Chabad house for 500 guests at times, 300 something, depending on the week. But just people who are touched by a Shabbos. So does we could do it here. We don't have to go to Thailand. We could we know a Yid that may need a place for Shabbos. Anything that we do certainly has an impact, and that's the message.
I found a very good quote. Chabad is a vibrant, dynamic force in Jewish life, and its programs touch the lives of millions of people, affect Jewish life in every community. I think it's a very true quote. I found it on one of the websites and that talks about Chabad. Very interesting. So tell me a little bit. Tell me a little bit about the difficulties that a typical shliach would go through. I mean, there's no red carpet waiting for him, or trumpets.
True.
You come there. There's none of that. You come and you start all. You don't get money from anywhere, right? You have to do everything yourself. Is that right?
So, each shliach has different challenges. We came to an established shul. Actually, we just celebrated our 40th anniversary. So the founding members of the shul, um, you know, you could say they were Bali Tshuva, or came, from more traditional homes. They started the shul because the uh, the conservative temple that where they originally came from, obviously was not from, was a conservative temple, and they decided to start a shul. So it actually started from the community, from members of the community, and they called it a chabura, I think, at the time. And we still have, Baruch Hashem, those members. We have the Gelb family, the Help family, some the Zwebners. These are founding members of the shul that wanted to have a from shul. So, in a way, it wasn't as challenging, at least in terms of mamish starting from scratch. We had Baruch Hashem the shul. The thing that we really tried to introduce is reaching out. Reaching out to the unaffiliated. So we started 10 years ago. Is a minyan. We have the minyan in the shul, and then we rent out a auditorium at a public school for Yom Kippur, so that people who want to come Yom Kippur, it's a little, so yeah, in modest size, I should say, space. So we have this larger space where people will feel more comfortable. And Baruch Hashem, we get 200 people.
Wow.
So it's a tremendous. People have this feeling of wanting to come, wanting to connect, and they feel that they feel that once they come one time, let me try it again. So people think, oh, what's the point? They're coming. The Yom Kippur Jews, they come once a year, and they don't come back. Well. That's true for some people, but then others feel that, what, let me get my child involved, and they said, let me send him to Talmud Torah, let me send him to a Hebrew school on Sundays. They start sending it to Sunday school. They sometimes they're interested in yeshiva day school. So we mentioned the Hebrew Academy we have, led by Rabbi Yuzansky, and. They feel this commitment. They feel that they want to do something. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's tragedy that gets them to Yiddishkeit. The loss of a parent, God forbid, or other tragedies that they feel that they want to come to shul. They have to say Kaddish or whatever. But in a way, for us, we feel that this is something that we want to offer, because it's something that we feel that is needed. It's not for us, it's not so much of a chiddush. Like you said, going out to maybe to a faraway place, that's more challenging. But
what's like the typical challenge of the rabbi in Thailand, in Bangkok, that he's just talked about? What would be his? Give me 2-3 challenges that he would typically go through.
So I think chinuch is a first challenge. I mean, we, Baruch Hashem, have yeshivas on Staten Island. We have the Merkaz HaTorah, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef. So we were very comfortable with the yeshivas for girls and for boys. But I know Shabbosim is difficult for the kids because they don't have your typical from neighborhood kids that you just go over on Shabbos afternoon. So that becomes a challenge, and being able to drive, to the frum community for Mishmar, for obviously London, whatever, that's just an added. But the truth is, compared to Thailand, it's nothing. But I think I remember reading that Rabbi Rulam was saying that chinuch is one of the challenges because they have to send their kids to Eretz Yisrael or to America to Pashut.
Very young.
At a very young age, meaning even elementary age, they would have to send. Now, granted, they have families in Eretz Yisrael or in America, but it's not easy for the child. growing up at a grandmother's home or in an uncle or aunt's home, and being away from Tati and Mami. So I think number one is chinuch. There's no question about it. For them, I think kosher food might be another. I mean, I think I read somewhere in Nepal, which is near India. So over there, they don't allow meat because they consider the cow sacred. So it's forbidden to have meat. So they have to rely only on chicken. Okay, so you can say that's an inconvenience. They'll need to have chicken, nevach, but but it's still, I guess, it's not.
Yantav, you have a problem.
Do you want to have flesh? You want to have real meat? But I know that again, I was reading or I saw an interview about the shluchim um, in Saint Martin, S. Martin, in the islands. So you think, wow, the islands. Well, in Machai, you think about the vacation, relaxation, the palm trees. What she said? No, it's not so simple. She said that first of all, there's no playgrounds for some reason. They don't have playgrounds. They only have beaches. So go put your kid on the beach. I mean, okay, you play a little bit in the sand, fine. After a while, you get bored. You want to have a slide. You want to have a jungle gym. They don't have for some reason.
Because it's for adults.
It's for adults, and right. And the kid, if they figure the kids are gonna, when at the time they're gonna be there, are gonna be playing the sand, but they're not going. They don't think about too much about the people who live there. They say also medical care is not the best. So, for example, I'm sure you're familiar with the story with Rabbi Gabi Holtzberg in Mumbai, and Rabbi Gabi and Rivki. Very sad. It's interesting that we named our daughter Ella Rivka, around the same time of the terrible tragedy in Mumbai. So I remember that they had children in Eretz Yisrael. They had to fly back and forth. They had children before that were not well. That it was very difficult for them. That they
left over little boy Moshe, right?
And Moshe was the one who was saved by the nanny.
Right.
That was the great, and he just went back recently with Benjamin Netanyahu and the whole entourage from Eretz Yisrael. They went back, and they it's very moving how the mother would make a mark on the wall, how tall he was getting, and I think Benjamin Netanyahu made a mark, for his latest height of, how tall he is now, and it's sad. It's sad. I remember the cries that he was crying out for his mommy and tati, and these things we don't understand. Any tragedy, and especially for people as Kedoshim and Torahim, that gave their lives, as well as the others, the Kedoshim that were taken from us. In Kfar Chabad, there was a tragedy in Tafshin Tezayin in 1957. There was an Arab who came into the yeshiva and killed the teacher who realized what was going on. He protected the kids. Could have been more kids, students that were killed, and the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, sent young yeshiva bachrim to be there and to be mechazik the yeshiva. We don't give up. That's the message. That we continue on.
Wow. This is amazing. Okay, so what happens when someone comes to you and says, Rabbi, how can I observe Shabbos when my store has its best sales on Saturday? You have all these questions on Chabad website. So when you have these questions, like you're faced with
real dilemmas, real questions. And
are you trained to answer these questions?
Look, I as I mentioned, we used to go out on Fridays. I remember, when you're younger, yes, you don't have so much conversations. But when you're getting older, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, they start asking real questions. I remember I used to have, so at first I remember in Montreal, when I learned the yeshiva in Montreal for 2 years, before I went to Melbourne, and I remember that was when I was 17, and I started to first, or maybe even younger, 16. I started to first have these deep conversations with Yidden that were not at all frum, and they had real questions about Yiddishkeit, like Shabbos and Emunah and so many other questions they had, and it started making me think. Then I used to go back to yeshiva and started doing research, and either speak to the mashpim, the rebbeim, or I used to learn a little more, read a little bit more on these topics, and made me think about these topics. Now sometimes you come to a wall where the person is not interested. He wants to ask questions. That you have also, where it's difficult. You know, they say someone from my shul mentioned it recently. He was in Chernobyl, 1986, when the nuclear reactor exploded. So he was a major. He was a quite high-ranking officer, but he remembers the generals, which were communists. This is still before the fall of communism. The generals were mamish. They were not Jews, but they were praying. They were praying to God. They were saying, "Please don't let the other two reactors explode." They were so. They themselves understood that when they say there's no atheists in the foxhole, when it comes to a point where you have no choice. Obviously, you believe in the Eibush. You have certain people who they say are they don't want to believe, or they choose not to. Listen, you try to explain to them, and in a very calm way. I remember after I came back from Australia, I used to visit in Flushing Avenue. There's a bunch of stores there. Graham Avenue, there's like electronics. Until today, in fact, I just called him this week. Neil, we used to have these conversations. He belonged to a conservative temple in Long Island. We had a very friendly conversation about Yiddishkeit, and he used to listen a lot. They like to listen, and you listen. Yiddishkeit is a wealth. There's a tremendous amount of ideas and inspiration. People really get excited about Yiddishkeit, and they just it has to be presented in a nice way, and they listen.
Rabbi, I know that
Bevasha.
it's a kids program, and I always sitting this my question like this, and I really want about. It's a nice way, nice way, but the Torah is not nice way. I'm talking about what is the approach of. Is it not? I would say contradict between the nice way and the Torah. In a certain way, I know that Darchei Noam, but you have to tell the truth. I got a text from a lady. She was praying with Chabad Shul, and I want to mention where, for many years. And she used to come with a car to the shul. And some shuls also, I know that they have also valet parking over there. Parking. How it's the nice way with the Shabbat and giving. I know the story that people become Balei Tshuva because they come with a car, but is it not that because this lady texts us and tells us that after about 4 years that she coming to the shul with a car, the son of the rabbi, a boy, told her, you know that you're not allowed to do? And she approached the rabbi.
So why didn't you tell me?
And the rabbi said, it starts stuttering. Why didn't tell me that it's wrong?
Nachon.
And this is something that I really bother with this movement, the nice way.
Right.
Either you say it, or you teach, or you teach people to stay in a crooked way all the time. Okay, it's okay, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will forgive you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgive you, it's okay, no problem. This is what is the approach about it?
So I'll tell you a story that I heard that happened in the 1940s with the Lubavitcher Rebbe on Eastern Parkway, which at that time was not a frum community. It was very Jewish, but not at all. Dati was not at all frum. And the story goes, it was during the war, 1943 or 1944, and there was a Jewish woman, carrying her groceries on Shabbat. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe turns to her and says, "You know it's Shabbat?" She said, "I know it's Shabbat." He says, "Do you have a child in the service, in the army that's fighting in Europe?" She says, "Yes, I do." What if I told you, if you put your bag down, and I'll have the Bachurim watch it until after Shabbat, and I'll tell you that this is going to save your son's life in Europe. She says, "Of course." She says, "I'm telling you, this is going to save." And sure enough, she did it. And later on, she got a letter that you should know that I was in a very difficult situation, and miraculously I was saved. And she said, "Oh, it must have been because I put down my bag." And she started keeping more and more Shabbat. there's no question that the Chabad does not believe that we tell people to drive to come to synagogue. It's not what Chabad should say, and it's not the policy. Now, unfortunately, I can't speak for everyone, but certainly not to have valet. That's out of the question. Unfortunately, I know that people do drive to Beit Knesset, unfortunately, and I know that, for example, in my shul, I have people, unfortunately, that do drive. I mean, the minyan itself, we have Baruch Hashem Shomer Shabbat, as I mentioned. Our Beit Knesset is already 40 years old, so we have from the founders. But clearly, it's not something that I never say it's it's permissible. I never say that it's permissible. I never, say that you should come and it's okay. But what we do is we try to explain in a nice way that, if you could walk, we have in Staten Island a train that stops every stop without paying. It's free. It's the way they had it for many years, where it's like we call it the Shabbos train, where it stops every stop. So l'chatchila, I wouldn't take it, but I spoke to different poskim, Rabbi Bluth and so on, and he told me that if you have someone that's going to drive or take the train, it's better to take the train. So I tell them always that, look, you have an option, at least in Staten Island, to take the train. You don't have to drive. You shouldn't drive. So, but again, once someone came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and complained, how are you so nice to the non-dati? A non-dati is not shomer Torah mitzvah. So he went to his father-in-law, the Rayatz, and he said, "Is it true that we shouldn't be nice to the non-datis?" He says, "Let me ask you." He says, a child, the father and the child, the father loves the child. He says, "Sure. What if the child has a special needs? He says, "As a child, the father's going to love him more." He says, "Chas v'shalom, if the child's missing an arm or a leg, the child even loves him more. But how could you love him more if the father loves?" He says, "The father, even with all the love that he has for a regular child, he's going to love the child even more." He says, "We have to look at every Jew that's not shomer Torah mitzvah as if that is a special need."
No question. But if the kids the kid's child need a special need, as a father, you have to teach him. And this is my biggest complaint. We have a shul also, and I know that people that not Shomer Shabbat, and we love them and we keep them, but we are trying to teach them and basically talk with them non-stop. And I know that because Batecha, most of the Chabad basically is, I wouldn't call it a private business, but it's self-independent. It's independent. And many times I found it as a collusion. And I'm sorry that I take the time, and this is the kids' show, so
Right.
I'm okay.
One last thing I want to mention: Meir Abasera. He's very well known in the community. Michel Abasera. And one thing I always, as a child, we used to go to him for the Hilulah. I remember there was a story, and I knew the family where it happened to, that the father, as a young man, came to his house with a motorcycle, but he had a siddur. And one thing Michel Abasera told him, you brought a siddur. That always stuck in my mind, and it actually brought him to Yiddishkeit. So you're right, there's no question we should be careful, and I agree. But B'ezrat Hashem,
all these kids, I think the answer to everything, I don't know if I'm right, is that these kids are kids in pain.
Mm-hmm.
That we don't really have apikosim today. They're all in pain. They don't.
Tinok shenishba.
Right.
Shenishbu.
So I don't know if you want to go head to head with them.
Right,
it's not kedai. Well, boys and girls, this is Rabbi Yochanan Ivri. Wow.
The time went so quickly.
What a beautiful, lecture. Beautiful. In a nutshell, you explained to us exactly how the system works and some of the challenges and what you do and what your goals are and your she'ifas, and that's amazing.
Thank you. It was a real honor. And Toda Rabba Be'emet. It was a real pleasure and honor. And for Dover, I'm sure as well.
And Rabbi Ivri,
thank you.
Hashem should help you.
Amen.
Should always be matzliach in your endeavors, and
Amen.
you have so many inspirations, and give it over to other people.
Amen. Toda Rabba. Thank you.
Okay. There we have it, the minig in this show is that we always end off with Ka'ech Seif from Ubar and Kalina. This is how we finish. And now we can't hear the music. So we have a special Ka'ech Seif without music.
Wollt ich gelaufen in der Gasse, in ich war